So this was actually a really interesting exchange that actually went down on Twitter. Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk got into a back and forth with a guy from Pod Save America. Pod Save America is possibly like the biggest politics podcast. I'm not exactly sure. It's pretty huge. It's very popular amongst centrist libs. And I believe that the Pod Save America hosts were, I believe they were guys who worked in the Obama administration, actually. So, basically, there was a CNN headline that read, "The top two Senate leaders are nearing a power-sharing agreement to hash out how the divided chamber will operate, with Democrats in charge of setting the schedule, but both parties likely to hold an equal number of seats on Senate committees," sources say. And so Kyle Kulinski responded to that saying, "There's no Democratic Party, there's the Republican Party and the Diet Republican Party." So while Kyle's statement is true, having that response to that story headline doesn't really make any sense when you really read the details of what's going on. If Senate splits are pretty rare. I think this is the third or fourth time it's happened in American history, a 50-50 split. And as you guys know, Kamala Harris comes in to break ties, but, there are committee votes, and you have to sort of, when you have 50-50 split, you have to do the resolution and have this power sharing agreement. That's the precedent that's set. There's no real alternative to that. I think the only way would be a filibuster, ending the filibuster. I don't even know for sure if that would change that. But Joe Manchin is not down with breaking the filibuster. So Mitch McConnell is no longer going to be the Grim Reaper. He cannot block bills from coming up, which is what he's been doing this entire time. And a tie in committees will not result in a no vote. So if a bill is tied up and it has a tie vote in the committee, it will still be brought up for a vote. The only thing is, one Democrat can basically hold up the entire process. Committees are going to be tied. The Democrats do set the agenda. Chuck Schumer does set the agenda. So the response to this, I thought, was just kind of stupid. And honestly, it seemed to be the case that, Kyle didn't seem very educated on a Senate tie or how those things really work, unfortunately, is what it seems to be the case. But is his statement incorrect that there's the Diet Republican Party and that there's a Republican Party? No, it's absolutely correct. So a guy named Tommy Vietor, he's a co-host of Pod Save America, and he says, yeah, sure, as long as you don't care about actual policy, the two parties are exactly the same. Climate change deniers versus the folks who support the Green New Deal, they're all the same now because of a poorly worded headline about a procedural matter. So it's interesting, right? So what Kyle was trying to say was, he was trying to say that they're not the same party, they're still slightly different, right? Like on something like net neutrality, or the most basic, super basic, that really does nothing. The Paris Climate Accord, for example, very, very basic sort of differences. They do exist, right? But it's not really extremely substantive or really, really major. And what he's doing here is he's somehow saying that versus the folks who support the Green New Deal, right? The contrast here is climate change deniers versus the folks who support the Green New Deal. Now, Republicans are indeed climate change deniers, but the Democratic Party and Democratic politicians do not support the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal is actually currently in Congress, a fringely supported plan. And Nancy Pelosi actually made fun of it. She called it the Green New Dream in a very facetious way, in a very trolly, pot shot taking way. This is not something that Democrats support. They do not support the Green New Deal. Democrats, for the most part, just support the Paris Climate Accord, which is, again, and this is a trend with Democrats, it's a very minor change that often doesn't really get to the systemic issues, right? Biden says no new fracking. He doesn't want to end the current fracking. He just doesn't want to add any more fracking. Things like that, right? And that's the issue. Affordable Care Act, does it solve the fundamental issue? No. First of all, it leaves millions of people uninsured, but it doesn't fix our system. Our system is plagued with the garbage that is brought by A, private insurance, and B, employer-based insurance, which is the dumbest healthcare system ever created of all time. But having private health insurance in place doesn't really make sense for the healthcare industry. For that specific commodity, it doesn't make sense. And it inflates all the prices and makes it completely just insane prices, right? You don't really have any negotiation powers. And it ends up being a complete disaster because what we see is incredibly inflated prices, and that's why you can look at the prices of healthcare items or services here compared to any other nation, and it's just absolutely insane, right? It's completely through the roof in the U.S., and it's because of that system, It really the main piece of that ACA is really, the individual mandate, which forces you to buy private health insurance. So it doesn't fix the issue. It doesn't even get close. So Kyle responds saying, I didn't say they're exactly the same. I said there's the GOP and Diet GOP. That means they're too similar, not the same. I'm looking forward to laughing at you as you rush to defend milquetoast centrism the next 4 years. Rah, rah, blue team. Tommy responds saying, yeah, it was a stupid comment based on what the article says about Senate procedure, and one that requires a willful ignorance of differences on policy. But I get that you've built a brand on saying both sides are bad, so I will continue to ignore you as you rush to repeat it. So he's kind of trying to imply here that Kyle Kulinski is sort of in on a grift, or he's built a brand and he just has to follow this line, even though he thinks, he may think it's stupid or he doesn't really believe it, but he has to say it because it's the brand he's built. Sort of something that a lot of Sam Cedars of the world will say about Jimmy Dore, for example. And so that's kind of what he's alleging here. He says, you'll continue to ignore me, quote, continue to ignore me because I'm correct and you're an elitist prick. If Dems aren't too much like Republicans, here's some reading for you. One of the leading contenders for the top antitrust position in the Biden DOJ team teamed up with Cruz in 2010. And he links an article, Big Tech Critics Alarmed at Direction of Biden Antitrust Personnel. A candidate for an antitrust position once worked at a law firm that partnered with a different law firm that employed Ted Cruz, that he raised all the differences between the two parties on climate, abortion, healthcare, criminal justice reform, minimum wage, taxes, and marijuana. So again, this isn't really, it's sort of, it's sort of kind of maybe a miscommunication or a willful miscommunication. Obviously, the point being made clear here, obviously, is that there are differences on these issues, and that's exactly what he's trying to say. But that they're way too similar is the issue. That's exactly what is trying to be said here. And so this is sort of a straw man is what you're looking at, essentially. And then it appears that this is a clip that is linked by Kyle, which is a clip of Barack Obama basically saying that, I believe he says that his policies are the same of a 1980s Republican, which is a clip that actually, when you try to search it up, it's actually kind of hard to find, which I find to be interesting. But it is a direct quote from Barack Obama. He does say his policies are so mainstream, so moderate that they are that of a 1980s Republican. So he says, you really love straw manning. At no point did I say there's no difference between the two parties. That's what you pretended I said because you're a hack looking for cheap retweets. I said they're too similar because they are. Take it from your old boss, not from me. Tommy says there are major differences between the two parties on existential issues like climate change. The cheap RTs come from sharing an article about Senate procedure and pretending it means the parties are too similar. So just kind of going in circles here again. Tommy saying, there's major differences. There's slight differences, certainly, but definitely wouldn't call them major. And then, just going back to the Senate procedure thing. And Kyle says, no, it's called a substantive point, something you know nothing about because you have partisan blinders on. Biden supported Iraq War, NAFTA, Patriot Act, bankruptcy bill, crime bill. Isn't it fair to call that too much like Republicans, or is it by definition good because a Dem did it? Tommy says, people said Bush and Gore were the same. They said Clinton and Trump were the same. Democrats have fucked up a lot of things. But constantly saying they're all bad is harmful and leads people to do stupid shit like vote for Nader or Jill Stein. I'd rather work to advance policy. And Kyle says, I never once said they're the same because they're not the same. I'm saying they're too similar because they are too similar. Example, the policies I sent you. All I care about is policy. If you don't want people voting third party, then hold your beloved Dems to a higher standard, and they won't. Last election showed there's a massive differences between the two parties on policy. I think now is the time to get to work on enacting those changes and not go looking to get spun up about a Senate procedural matter. Have a good one. So, there's a lot of stuff that's going on right now that Biden's doing that are somewhat similar to Donald Trump. I saw that he's going to recognize Juan Guaido as the leader of Venezuela, so he's trying to essentially coup Nicolas Maduro over there. While they say that his head guy, when it came to foreign policy, I believe it was, had said that the plan is to stop the support for the Saudi-led, basically, war going on in Yemen right now. But, when asked what that really means, he said he didn't really give a real answer. And it was like, oh, we need to see what we're doing for support. It looked like kind of a dodge and more of a symbolic thing rather than doing a real thing. Now, something like, getting back in the Iran deal is definitely a big deal. So there are a lot of similarities. Obviously, he said he would veto Medicare for All, doesn't support Green New Deal, all this kind of stuff, right? So there are differences, like Kyle said, but Democrats do not look for systemic change or solutions like actually getting Medicare for All, universal healthcare system, getting rid of private insurance, which is the sole issue in our healthcare system. They rather look for little bandages that don't actually do shit, that once the next Republican comes in, they can repeal with the snap of a finger. Like we saw a lot of Obamacare get blown up by Trump. So it just seems to be, I don't know, kind of clear here. Kyle says, if only I had gotten to work on exactly that, but I don't know, co-founding the Justice Democrats. The, quote, massive difference between the parties isn't nearly massive enough. And I get the sense you know this, but are refusing to admit it. And then he puts a gif of the little disappearing meme, the peace out disappearing gif. So, that's kind of what it is, and he's pointing out, yeah, I am working to try to get these policy positions through. So, honestly, what I would like to see is, I would like to see a genuine conversation with these two guys. They should get on a call together, but they should go in, they should go into the conversation looking to have a real, a good-hearted discussion, not a debate, but a good-hearted discussion, because I think it'd be interesting to see, because these are clearly two people coming from different worlds, right? Kyle coming from the Justice Democrat, Bernie-crat wing of the Democratic Party. If you even want to call him a Democrat, that is. And then you have a sort of Obama guy and this Tommy guy who's from Pod Save America. I'd like to see sort of some of that be hashed out. It'd be interesting to see if Kyle can get any concessions and sort of really see and gauge what exactly is what Tommy's thoughts are and how they can go forward, and what policies does he support, what does he think that the Democrats should support. He does seem to concede that there are problems in the Democratic Party with Democratic politicians. So I'm genuinely curious to see how that conversation would go, because I do want to see, I really do want to see where they could go in this kind of conversation. Can he pull Tommy to have some concessions that would lead centrist Democrats more into a leftward direction? I genuinely would like to see this conversation. I doubt they're going to do it, because they kind of seem to be pretty adversarial here. So I wouldn't hold my breath to see this happen. But I would love to see a conversation like this, because I think it's important to try to sniff this out and see what's kind of going on here. But Kyle's comment about it being diet Republican Party is definitely true. There are some minor differences, but they're definitely not major. He then later said, "This can't be true. The pod suck off America guy told me Dems aren't similar to Republicans last night." And it's a tweet from Jeff Stein that reads, "Senator Maria Cantwell, Democrat from Washington, calls on Yellen to use sanctions aggressively. I do believe in using sanctions. The Trump administration failed to be as aggressive on sanctions. I want to be sure use that as an economic tool." So the reason why progressives are against sanctions is because typically sanctions end up hurting the average person in a country, especially poor people. Like in Iran, a lot of poor people getting hurt, not being able to get medicine, things of that nature. So that's why progressives are against this. So it's going to be interesting to see how really different Biden's going to end up being than Trump. There are definitely going to be some differences for sure, obviously. But it's going to be interesting to see how really different it's going to be. But again, I would love to see a convo between these two guys. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen.